everyone, and welcome to the Legal Tech Hub product briefing. I'm Stephanie Wilkins, and today I'm delighted to be here with Amit Shah, the CEO and founder of ContractKen. Welcome, Amit.
Hi, Stephanie. Nice to meet you, and hi, everyone.
So ContractKen is an AI CoPilot for contracts, providing AI-powered drafting and review in Microsoft Word. It leverages a combination of AI tools and techniques, including GPT-4-based generative AI. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. I was hoping you could give our audience a little bit of your own personal background and then the background of ContractKen and why you founded it and what it does before we jump into a live demo.
Sure, I'll keep it quick. So I founded ContractKen about 3 years ago, and prior to that, I've worked in the corporate for about 20 years, last 3 of which were working as a consultant for large financial services firms, helping them on various legal data related problems, whether it is insurance claims or contracts or billing data and so on and so forth. While working with some of the largest financial services companies in the US, I realized this is an exciting field. And around the same time, NLP and machine learning was becoming more active and powerful. And this is about 7 or 8 years ago. And I got much deeper into this space and ContractKen to explore risk analysis and some of the contract analysis use cases in this space. Actually, ContractKen is a combination of contract plus Ken, and Ken in English stands for understanding. So that was the original thinking behind the brand. Didn't really spend a lot of time or money doing that. And around the time when the whole generative AI field exploded, we realized, and some of our existing customers actually nudged us to start looking more at the work that lawyers do pre-signature on contracts. And we focused on the pre-signature part of the contract lifecycle. And over the last 18 months or so, it's been a great journey. We have very strong product which helps lawyers review and draft contracts using their own playbooks, their own checklists, their own clause data, and of course, powered by the powerful large language models and some of our own proprietary AI capabilities.
That's great. I love that. I always love to know how companies and products got their names. So thank you for sharing that. Before we jump into the demo, can you just give a slight preview and explain to our audience what it is you're going to be showing us today?
Yeah, sure. So as I said, our product is not meant for people who are not legal professionals. So we're not trying to help other business people do work which lawyers are supposed to do. Typically, lawyers and corporate lawyers and transaction lawyers spend a ton of time working with contract documents inside Word, and that's where our product comes into picture. So let's assume that as a lawyer in a law firm, your client, which is, let's say, a manufacturing firm, has sent you a supply agreement draft, and they are negotiating something that with their customer, right? Sorry, with their supplier. And they want you to negotiate it, draft it, finalize it, and they want it, of course, to be done very quickly. So that's where our product helps lawyers not just speed up the whole process of review, identifying issues, redlining, commenting it, but also ensuring that it's consistent with their checklist and their playbooks. So I can actually share my screen and quickly walk through how this thing looks like in real.
Sure, let's jump in and have a look.
Okay, great. So I've got a few Word documents here to talk about, but as I was saying, here's a supply agreement. We downloaded it and changed the party names, but it's a completed supply agreement between two parties in the US. And as the lawyer presenting the supplier, what is it that I can do with ContractKen? So I'll just click and open up ContractKen and we'll quickly set it up, set review so it understands it's a supply agreement. I have to select whether I review it for the buyer or the supplier. So I'm representing the buyer. And then there are, of course, fields like business objective, industry, and any other additional context if you want to give I'll leave the defaults in there and let the AI start its magic. So at this point of time, the algorithms have started analyzing the contract and they are going to identify a set of boilerplate issues, right? And these boilerplate issues would be risks for the buyer or certain ambiguous terms which it thinks need to be clarified, things which actually favor the buyer, so should not be negotiated out by the supplier. We'll also identify things missing from the contract, anything which is redundant or is conflicting. So it does a thorough scan of the contract and identifies a bunch of the issues and insights for every contract. Now, you have to keep this in mind that this is a standard playbook that we are applying on a supply agreement. Typically, what happens is when we are working with our long-term customers, they have their own playbooks, their own checklists using which they typically review or draft contracts. So we help them integrate it within this tool and they can then review these contracts based on that playbook. Actually, let me show you how the whole review thing will work. So while this thing gets completed, let me show you another contract, which is a lease agreement, which is already reviewed and completed. So it says there are about 23 issues that it has identified. But first go to the risk. So it says this is one of the risks for the tenant. So late penalty, it has identified it as a risk for the tenant, and it has highlighted the section of the contract which it feels is probably the language needs to be negotiated. There are red line suggestions here. The user can accept the suggestions as is, and you can just say apply to doc, and the changes are automatically made and a comment is created. If you actually want to make modifications to the red line suggestions, let's say if I want to add to security deposit use, so the red line suggestions made by the tool need some addition. So I can do that and I'll then apply that, and those additional changes would get added to the issue. In this way, I can go through, there are probably 10 or 15 top level risks that have been identified. I can just keep going through them. I can apply them, or I can make edits and keep going through them. So that's like the boilerplate capabilities that it offers. As I said, it's not just identifying the risks, but also identifying something which might be ambiguous. So it says the commencement date of this lease is not clearly defined, right? Or there is some ambiguity over the holdover period. Again, you have certain suggestions, some red line suggestions that the tool is offering. Again, I could just apply it as is and it directly goes into the document. That's the boiler capabilities that it offers. The third category is a redundant term. So it says it's mentioned, waiver of subrogation is mentioned both in the insurance and indemnity sections. So there could be some inconsistency. So as a lawyer who's doing detailed review, you might want to just compare and see if there is anything which is inconsistent or conflicting across those two clauses. It has also identified terms which it feels are favorable to the party that we are presenting, which is the tenant. And so it says option to extend, abatement of rent, waiver of subrogation, consent of parties, and so on and so forth. Those are something which is favorable to the party for which we are reviewing this contract. So you just need to acknowledge it and make sure that it doesn't get negotiated out. And of course, it identifies if there is any typical clause in this jurisdiction which should be present in the contract, in this case, a commercial lease. So it says a right to cure should be added, which allows the tenant to remedy defaults before termination. You can add certain instructions, or you can just press draft clause, and it will basically take the entire context of the contract, the party names, and it understands the business context and create a custom clause. You could basically insert wherever you place your cursor. So if I want to put the right to cure here, I'll just insert at cursor location and it adds to the contract. So I think that's the boilerplate out of the box capabilities that it offers. We have a bunch of playbooks implemented, which I think is the next level of this concept.
Thank you for showing us the out of the box capabilities. I think you wanted to show us a little bit more of the extra capabilities. Is that right?
Yeah, sure. So I think the idea is that a lot of things which lawyers do across the life cycle of a contract being drafted or reviewed needs help, right? For example, I am, let's say, reviewing a particular clause. Let's say I'm just randomly picking out any clause, right? And I just want more analysis on this specific clause. So I can just highlight that section of the contract and say, give me more insights and more negotiation ideas for this clause. Check if there are any regulatory or compliance issues and compare this clause industry standard. So I'm doing all of that while just starting these analysis. So it's given me some insights on the clause. This is the purpose of this clause, and it's giving me some negotiation ideas. So I can take this idea and actually use it to redraft this clause. So I'm basically using the tool to generate some negotiation ideas, and I could actually just use the same idea to actually refine it. So I could say, I'll basically refine this clause. So it's going to take the existing clause language, give me another draft of this clause with some of these changes built into that. Of course, how do I compare? Give me the language which has been added, and if anything has been deleted, then it will show that in red. Essentially, the idea behind these features and these capabilities is to let lawyers get an overall sense of all the boilerplate issues and dive deep into any specific clause and things like that. An important aspect of our product is it helps you access your clause library. So there are 700 plus clauses that exist out of the box, which are some of the commercial contracting clauses that we have made available through this tool. Of course, users can actually create and manage their own clause library using our web application and then automatically integrate that with contract drafting using this feature. That's basically helping you access your clause library while you are working on these individual aspects. Now, one of the big things that we've heard from especially law firm lawyers is the amount of work that it's done in closing a contract, right? So which is to do with just checking defined terms, checking where is money referred to, where are dates and times, what are the to-dos and things like that. So we're basically building a complete formatted formatting module, which will include what are all the defined terms in this contract. So it basically shows me where is tenant defined. It's referred to at 171 instances. So I can just browse through this to see where all is tenant referred to. Similarly, I can see where is premises defined and where all is premises used. Where is this defined term used in the contract? So it's being used at 66 instances. So we are building out these modules which will help you manage your defined terms and identify it. So again, it has identified that, for example, something like condemnation. It is defined, but it is not used. So do you really want to keep it in contract in the definitions? So these are types of features which are, I would say, tasks which do not require a huge amount of AI. Lawyers end up spending a lot of time, right? So where all is money being referred to? Are these values correct or not? And where are the external references, right? So things relate external acts or laws, where all are they referred to in the contract, right? And so on and so forth. So those are all the types of things that we've built into our formatting module. And we continue to enhance it almost on a daily basis.
Great. That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing that with us today. Were there any other things you wanted to highlight in the demo?
I would go back and show you the supply agreement that we started off with. So while we were talking, I think it took us about 2 minutes to complete this. But again, it's the same interface and it came back with 36 different issues that it has identified. And I think we've gone through some of the other.
Great. Oh, that's great. That's why we love real-time demos, so we can see how quickly things work.
Yeah.
And what we'll do for those watching is that we'll put a URL at the bottom of the screen so that people can reach out to you, Amit, and your team if they have more questions and want to learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I would say is what you see here is our standard ContractKen playbooks, and we have, I would say, a special focus on the commercial real estate industry. So for leases, purchase agreements, and other commercial real estate related agreements, we have, I would say, a strong playbook. But for any other type of contract, this tool could be used. And if you have specific playbooks that you want to implement this kind of redlining, we'll be happy to work with you and get it.
Great. Sounds wonderful. So check out that URL below. And Amit, thank you for spending your time with us today and showing us ContractKen.
It was a pleasure, Stephanie. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time, and that's everyone.